सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
For national interest this week, we are back to our favorite, or maybe not such a favorite subject or personality, which is General Parvez Musharraf. Now, there are three reasons we say why it isn't yet time to write the obituary of General Parvez Musharraf. One, modern life support systems can keep on going for a long time even after many organs might have failed. In fact, all of today there have been rumors about General Musharraf. There were rumors that he was on ventilator or life support, but he's on some kind of life support, and his family has also been tweeting that everybody should pray for his recovery because he's suffering now some multiple organ failure. So we don't know exactly what's happened. That's the reason we can't call it an obituary yet. We can't jump that gun. Two, he had ceased to matter in his country and the neighbors he tormented almost 15 years back. So you might ask if he still mattered. 15 saal pehle, 15 years back, he had ceased to matter, say about in about 2007. And three, because the really bad guys, the dictators and especially uniformed dictators never really die. They leave an unerasable legacy of destruction and malevolence. How lasting their impact can be, see the permanent damage Zia-ul Haq has done to Pakistan. Not only did he unseat and assassinate one elected leader, that is Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, but he also laid the foundations of Pakistan's jihadi mindset. Even today, the dominant impulse in Pakistani popular politics can be described as Ziaism. It's been anything but good for Pakistan and worse for its unfriended neighbors like us, India, or deeply quoted friends such as the US. It was thanks to his patronage of militarized Islamists or jihadis and exportable jihad that Pakistan's economy and society are in ruins today. I've told you this story before and I'll repeat again that when I first went to Pakistan in 1985, my eyes popped out because it was evident that Pakistan's economy was doing much better than India's. Average Pakistani was much better off than India's. And when I came back and checked the data told us the story. In 1985, Pakistan's per capita GDP was about 65%, that is 2/3 of it times higher than India. Today, it is about 30% less than India's and the gap is increasing in India's favor. I hold Zia responsible for this downturn for Pakistan because Zia planted the poisonous tree. He decided to use jihad or terrorism as an instrument of state policy. And that is what Pakistan is paying a price for. Now Zia planted this poisonous tree and nurtured it, and Musharraf thought he'd pluck a rich harvest from it and become a hero in his nation's history. He ended up instead a zero, a convict for high treason for destroying his own constitution, handed the death sentence by a trial court for high treason and only reprieved later on a technicality. And what was the technicality? Among the major reasons why the higher court acquitted him is that the court held that it's improper under Islamic law to try a man in absentia. And why was Musharraf tried in absentia? Of course, he was absent from trial because the almighty Pakistani army had brokered his exile, because he would not come to his country and face trial physically. A trial in absentia, the higher court said, does not conform to Islamic principles, and that's how the death sentence was taken off his head, but he remained in exile. Now, his life by now was reduced to occasional ranting on Twitter and posting his pictures, self-pitying pictures in the inpatient livery in some Dubai hospital. Now, in the last 4 decades, Musharraf is the only significant Pakistani leader I could not interview formally. Truth to tell, I never asked for an interview with him. We did, however, have some public conversations individually and in groups. Most of these are recorded. He is among the vainest and least intellectually endowed leaders ever. And that's saying a lot given the wide range of political leaders in the subcontinent and elsewhere that I've had the experience of knowing over such a long career in journalism. Now, the coup he staged in the fall of 1999 was easy. No military coup in Pakistan has ever failed, barring the first, the so-called Rawalpindi conspiracy of 1951. It was not led by the army chief of the day, but by a major general. And probably, I mean, this is my facetious view, probably it failed most likely because it was led by leftists. The general was a leftist, and the leftist group that was leading the coup, including poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz. For a serving Pakistani chief, taking over power is as simple as sending the boys from the legendary 111 brigade to the elected leader's home and collect the keys. Right? Aapka time aa gaya, hame chavi dijiye, ab hum raj karenge. Important thing which is central to Musharraf's legacy, however, is what led up to his coup. That year had begun with Atal Bihari Vajpayee's storied bus ride to Lahore in January, his signing the Lahore Declaration signalling a thaw. A thaw so dramatic that Vajpayee himself walked up the steps of Minar-e-Pakistan, a kind of India Gate equivalent to Pakistan symbolically, and he said from there, from the steps of Minar-e-Pakistan, that a stable and prosperous Pakistan was in India's best interest. It was then that Musharraf, as the army chief, was planning Kargil precisely to torpedo this peace process. He didn't like it as much as Lashkar-e-Toiba and others didn't like it. In fact, some leaders of some of these groups, next day, the day after Vajpayee climbed on those steps, washed those steps so as to take out the toxicity that Vajpayee might have left there. Now, Musharraf failed in Kargil because his own Prime Minister called him out. But he was not to be thwarted from destroying that move towards peace. That's why he convinced his fellow generals, still smarting under the Kargil defeat, to back his coup against Nawaz Sharif. Now, peace over, he had finished the peace move. Bloodletting of the kind not yet seen broke out in the valley. There were incidents every day, there were deaths every day. The IC-814 hijack and the exchange of hostages, which included, by the way, the head of Jaish-e-Mohammed, with top terrorists, including Jaish-e-Mohammed chief and also Omar Sheikh, later convicted for the assassination of American journalist Daniel Pearl, bombing of the State Assembly in Srinagar on 1st October 2001, and then the parliament attack on 13 December 2001, which brought his country the closest to war with India it had been since 1971. It was touch and go. Now, Musharraf wasn't very smart, but nobody would tell him that. Who would tell a dictator, sir, I don't think you are as smart as you think you are, or you are being too clever by half. But that is what he was being, too clever by half. After 9/11, when he repackaged Pakistan as a stalwart ally of the Americans, while at the same time undercutting them and double dealing with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. He was caught out, and not because the Americans saw the light. Americans are usually the last to see the light. First of all, he wasn't able to control the jihadist forces he had unleashed. His jihadists had become a state within the state. Now, if you say that Pakistani army owns the state of Pakistan, now within that state of Pakistani army is ISI, which is a state within a state. By this time, however, ISI's own bachas, the jihadists, had become a state within that state as well. So they just wouldn't accept and couldn't accept Pakistan becoming a partner in the American war on terror, because they were philosophically and ideologically with the Taliban and with Al-Qaeda. There were multiple attempts on Musharraf's life by these so-called faithful, but he survived. His end, however, came because of that self-destructive belief all dictators have, that they are actually democrats. Even Putin believes that they are actually democrats, very popular, and know more about democracy than boring, bumbling civilians do. Every dictator in Pakistan has tried to bring in his own version of democracy. Field Marshal Ayub Khan called it guided democracy. Yahya Khan allowed some kind of political activity. He won elections as long as his power could remain intact. Zia experimented with partyless democracy after consecrating his own position with a sham referendum. Musharraf too added a democratic experiment to his own CV, attempted to bring in a new constitution, fought with his top judiciary and finally lost power to democratic street protests. He was now a far cry from the man who came strutting about so arrogantly for the Agra summit that even a pacifist like I.K. Gujral said he's acting as if he's a victor coming to a vanquished nation. I can tell you, I was there in Agra. That is exactly how his demeanor was at that point. By 2007, he was over as a leader. He was finished, but he had done enough damage to his country and to its neighbors. We saw it in the assassination of Benazir Bhutto, 26/11 attacks in India, and later the national embarrassment Pakistan suffered when the US Navy SEALs raided Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad and killed him. Now, to understand a Pakistani military dictator's maybe Democrat delusion, let me refer you to his address at the India Today conclave in 2004. Asking a question as a member of the invited audience, I reminded him that in that year, a very large number of democratic nations were having their elections. So when he was going to hold one in Pakistan and make Pakistan a democracy again, he got furious. How can you say you are a democracy and Pakistan isn't? It's an interference in Pakistan's internal affairs and so on. And he was saying this to me, a mere journalist. You can actually find that entire exchange in video and print on India Today's website. In the week after he took over in 1999, I wrote in the Indian Express that he should be aware that there's only one of three ways a dictator in Pakistan goes. One, assassinated by his successor, or jailed, or exiled after he started and lost a war with India. So those are the three options. So Musharraf could no longer hope to retire to play golf and fade away like good generals are supposed to. He didn't like that viewpoint. On one of his regular visits to Davos and at an interaction with a small group of editors, he sought me out, sort of gestured to me to come in like this. Just when we were saying goodbyes, Mr. So-and-so, he said, you used to be a well-informed journalist about Pakistani politics. We used to read you in our academies when you wrote in India Today, he said, looking at my former editor as if seeking endorsement or maybe complaining. But now, he said, you know nothing, you are outdated. Why so, General Sahib, I asked. He said, because you keep writing there is only one of three ways a dictator goes in Pakistan: assassination, jail or exile. Right? That's what he said. But sir, look at Pakistan's history, I argued. Forget history. He said, you make a basic error in thinking of me as a dictator. Ask your friends in Pakistani media. I know all of them. Ask them if they've ever had so much freedom as now. And so he concluded that brief exchange. If he could still review his own life now on his sick bed, he would admit the boxes he's checked. Started and lost a war to India, that is Kargil, was exiled and dodged the news Phansi ka Fanda only because his khaki boys wouldn't see a former chief hanged. So they brokered his exile. Now Musharraf wasn't 1% of the Islamist Zia was. Musharraf was very different. But in his own way, he's done enormous damage to Pakistan's future. Historians, in fact, would struggle and debate for decades over which dictator harmed Pakistan most. Zia-ul Haq will have competition.